its obligations, and perhaps commit a heresy. But nevertheless, what I intend to do is tell it as it is. And I want to refer to this document called variance, titled variance, which I had copies on the table. I hope everyone has one. It comes from the BRA, from the Boston Zoning Code by way of the BRA, and I want to emphasize the very first line, which I highlighted in yellow, which says, "The Board of Appeals shall grant a variance only if it finds that all of the following conditions are met." And I will focus on the conditions a little later, but I want to say that with respect to the action of the Zoning Board of Appeals, technically Board of Appeal, but we refer to it as ZBA also, there is an elephant in the room, not this room, the hearing room on the 8th floor of City Hall. The elephant is this, that the Board of Appeal ignores. This is the legal basis upon which a variance can be granted. Without the board finding all these conditions, it has no authority to grant a variance. When I started going to the Board of Appeals, reporting to them action taken by NEWRA in support or opposition to proposals, the then chairman, who is now no longer chairman, said, "Yes, we know all about that. Talk about the specific proposal itself." Some interesting aspects of this are that as I say, this document comes from the BRA. The BRA advises the Board of Appeal. I have a document that was given to me at a meeting that I had at City Hall with a representative of the Board of Appeal 2 or 3, perhaps 4 years ago. Mary was there, Dave Kubiak was there. It is titled "A Guide to the City of Boston's Zoning Board of Appeal Process." And it says that the BRA, the planning agency for the city, reviews all Board of Appeal applications and makes written recommendations to the board. Well, if it reviews the applications and makes recommendations, does it read its own Article 7 variance requirements? And if so, how can they ever make a recommendation to the board to support an appeal? Perhaps in other parts of the city, but let's focus on what has to be found by the board and think whether there's any piece of property in the North End that this could possibly apply to. And remember, all the requirements have to be found. That there are special circumstances or conditions fully described in the findings applying to the land or structure for which the variance is sought, such as, and there are suggestions that I'll get to later, which circumstances or conditions are peculiar to such land or structure, but not the neighborhood, and the said circumstance or conditions are such that the application of the provisions of this code would deprive the appellant of the reasonable use of such land or structure. Now, if you're dealing with a building that's been there for 100 years, that's been used as a residence for 100 years, how can you say that the reasonable use of that land, or that the owner is being deprived of the reasonable use of the land or structure if it's been used for 100 years? I can't see it. Is anyone listening? Is anyone from the city listening? How are you possibly supporting this? And remember, every one of these have to be found. The next one is demonstrable and substantial hardship. The granting of the variance is necessary for the reasonable use of the land or structure. What demonstrable and substantial hardship if it's already been used for 100 years? And I want to point out, President Mary and Dave may remember, well, Mary may remember that when we did this 5 or 6 years ago, I prepared a little memorandum, and I pointed out that the general laws applicable in other cities and towns include economic hardship. This does not include economic hardship. So to the extent that that's raised, it is, in my opinion, irrelevant in Boston. And finally, that the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this code and will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. Well, maybe that can be found, but remember, you have to find all three. Otherwise, it's not authorized. And this document that I've described as the Guide to the City of Boston Zoning Board of Appeal says, with regard to that, relief is granted after a public hearing and a finding that the proposed project is in harmony with the legal zoning in the neighborhood. Well, they've used the harmony language because it's the easiest one to find, to substantiate. But that's only one of three requirements. So, as I say, there is an elephant in the hearing room. Perhaps with a new administration, we can have someone pay attention to that. Why does this happen? I can let my imagination run, and I can say that if you ask the Board of Appeal, they might say, well, it's been done for decades, so we're just doing what has been established practice. Hasn't anybody asked in the decades, what is your authority to grant variances under, unless all those conditions are found? Another possibility may be economic development, that if people want to spend money on their building, it gives jobs to the construction industry. It enhances the value of the building and more taxes are collected. I don't know, as a hypothesis, that may be one of the answers. Other than that, I don't know. If anyone else has a suggestion, I'd like to hear it. I think that is all I want to say in general about, oh, no, I do want to say one or two other things about the consequences of that.
Just want to make you aware of the time. I mean, we do have a time constraint. Why don't you make those points quickly, but then maybe pick a couple of these. And I would definitely suggest focusing on 16 to 18 battery as an example of perhaps a process gone slightly awry.
Well, okay. Quickly, the consequences of this are, if you have deep pockets, or if you are a lawyer, you can appeal to the Superior Court and have a variance negated, nullified, because it fails to comply with all these three requirements. But that's expensive. If you don't have deep pockets, or you're not a lawyer, if you're just the mom and pop who lives next door, you're out of luck. Is this the way the system should work? I think not. And once again, I ask, is anybody listening? Would the city please pay attention to what has been going on for so many years without authority? Next, the 16 to 18. 1618 Battery Street. That was heard by the Board of Appeal a couple of weeks ago. And it was a situation where someone wanted to add an additional story and a roof deck to a building, another one that's been there for 100 years.
Which we're getting a lot of. I mean, that's like a standard ask now. I need to build up to 55 feet if I'm not there already.
And when it was heard by the Board of Appeals, they didn't seem to be moved by the fact that one couple said that they had bought their condominium for the purpose of enjoying the view of the tower of the Old North Church, and that if this was going to be built, they wouldn't be able to enjoy that anymore. That didn't seem, as I saw it, to move the Board of Appeal. What did move them was when Director Butter came up with a photograph, which he had enlarged to 8.5 by 11, that said, checkout time 11:30. And he said, it's being used as a hotel. In fact, it was being used as one of these short-term rentals that Councilor LaMartina has been talking about. One of the members of the Board of Appeals said, well, where is the owner? the owner wasn't there. The owner didn't show up at a ZLC meeting. The owner didn't show up when we voted to oppose. The Board of Appeal said, well, we'll defer. We want to see the owner here at the next meeting, and I can give you the date of the next meeting that it was deferred to, but I don't have it, I don't have it at the top of my head. That's what happened with 16 to 18, and I told them, you've won, because normally the Board of Appeal simply rubber stamps, okay, you want it, you can have it. This time, at least, they deferred.
And if I can just add something, I hope I don't get in trouble with saying this, but just going to try to be as objective as possible. We had the discussion, fairly heated discussion, you know, a lot of back and forth, photographs of people with suitcases going into the building, the fact that the website was pulled down as soon as they went into hearing, all sorts of stuff came out in our meeting. So last month, the vote, overwhelming. It was, I think there were only 2 or 3 people in support, everyone else opposed, and there were about 40 people in the room. So overwhelmingly no vote. Some of the folks who lived near that building, and there was another building that made a similar request for an extra story, asked a couple of us to go to the ZBA hearing, and I did. I'm not going to name names, but I noticed that somehow this project, first of all, had gotten the okay of the Office of Neighborhood Services. So, I mean, somehow our overwhelmingly negative vote got translated with a Nunic vote that went the other way. But then they offered an addendum that said, we didn't realize it was an Airbnb. And it becomes a yes. But I'm not picking on you. I'm just not.
I understand, but I have a right to tell you.
No, and that's but it appears a process that, just from my position, I couldn't understand everything I was saying. I had seen an overwhelming community outpouring, visible on videotape, against this, and a lot of expose of what had gone on, what was sort of shenanigans going on behind this building. I walk into the hearing. Not only is ONS in support, there are 4 city councilor supports as well. I'm not going to name them, but you know, you can only get 5, and they got 4 out of the 5. And I'm thinking, wow, you know, that was like that was, you know, a strip sack. But here it looked like it was, you know, a Hail Mary pass that would turn into a touchdown. It just totally wasn't what I was expecting when I walked into that hearing. And I just, that's the sort of from a layperson, because I haven't been around as long as you and David and Mary coming to the hearings, but it was sort of the weird thing, like, really? How does this happen? So maybe, Victor, you have something you can say about that, or Mary, you can say something.
Actually, I would like Nicole to please explain to us why the Office of Neighborhood Services thought this was a good project to support. I understand you saying Munich voted in favor of it, but why did Office of Neighborhood Services think this would be a good project to support for the neighborhood?
When we talked about it, we found that they did have community support, we thought it was a project that we could support, so we supported it.
Well, that really isn't a very good explanation. I'd like to know why you would think that this particular building going up would be something good for the neighborhood. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah, speak up, please. I can't hear you. Speak up.
I said that NEWRA did support it, and when we talked about it, we felt the project was worthy of our support, so we supported it.
But why? That's not explaining why you thought it was worthy of support. What were the things that you thought were good about it that you should support?
Well, you know, part of the reason I think Victor wants to read that is because we're not necessarily, again, we're not trying to pick on ONS saying there's only one disconnect, it's ONS. There's a sort of a major disconnect in the fact that if you look at the variances, Article 7, there seemed to be a lot of variances handed out, sort of more so than the framers of this document might have intended. And also, it seems that there's a lot of support that gets garnered by someone who is sort of a shady, well, I shouldn't say that because they may be a very nice person and we don't have any, but every indication, the website being pulled down just before the hearing, the fact that they're not willing to say it's an Airbnb, the fact that, you know, not showing up at the hearings, And the building is not, we hear a lot of people saying it's not really in the greatest state of repair. And, so there are a lot of red flags here. Enough red flags that, you would have thought that the overwhelming support wouldn't have been so easy to get, so.
And the ZBA meeting has been deferred, as Victor was mentioning, to Monday, February 23.
Right.
Thanks.
Tuesday.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, so that was a nice discussion. Thank you, Victor.